Tell if we're up.
I'm just sending some messages in the chat. It still
Right.
says waiting.
I think we're up. I hit start live broadcast. Okay. Well, everyone, welcome to, I guess this is technically the first Learn to Stargaze live interview. We've got Ian Lauer uh, in the house from Arkansas, right?
Alabama. Close.
Alabama. Sorry. Sorry, I don't know. I was thinking Walmart or something. Bentonville? No. Not Walmart. Rockets.
Rockets. There you go. Rockets.
Rockets, not shopping carts. All right. Anyway, so basically the way this is going to work, we're just going to have a conversation with Ian here, ask some questions. I'll try to keep an eye on the chat if I can find it. Just like last time, it sort of disappears on me. Keep an eye on the chat as well. Ask us questions. We're going to talk about, I guess, primarily transitioning from visual astronomy to astrophotography, which is something I know a lot of people do in their astronomy careers. But Ian, how did you get started in astrophotography? How did you catch this bug?
Oh man. So it all started at the Big Bang. No. So actually, I went to school for astrophysics, and I realized that research wasn't really my thing. But we had an observatory up with a big telescope, and I found myself absolutely loving being under the stars by the telescope. Now that telescope, even though it was nice and big, uh, we had a lot of clouds because it was in it was in the Pacific Northwest, so we only got to use it a few times. But after I graduated, I wanted to just dive into telescopes, and so I went to work for I got an internship at Meade Instruments,
Mm-hmm.
the telescope manufacturer, and I saw people were taking photos of nebulas like the Eagle Nebula and things like that. I was like, oh my gosh, like I thought like only Hubble took this stuff. I didn't know amateurs could do it. I thought you needed like $1 million and an observatory at the top of a hill. And I realized that people were buying telescopes from Meade and taking photos using these from their backyard. And it blew me away. And so I caught the bug and learned how to use all the equipment. And then I started working at another company, and it was just full of astrophotographers. And I started out with the huge telescopes. I mean, we had 16-inch telescopes and 12-inch scopes, and I started there and actually worked my way down to now. I'm mostly using like my I have like a Fujifilm camera, and so most people start with a camera and go to telescopes. I kind of went backwards, but that's okay.
Yeah, I had a chart at one point, and it showed aperture and time. Because a lot of people start out with a small scope. Like I started out with something like almost like this, horrible. Um, and then I got aperture fever, went up to the big Dobsonian, and then I slowly went down to a C8. And now, as I transitioned into astrophotography, now I'm using 50-inch, 40-inch scopes, like the Ascar 180, really small. And yeah, and I'm just wondering, how small could they get? I guess you're you're limited by the Rayleigh criteria, but astrophysics speak for your resolution of the telescope. But yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
The scope I use a lot now. It's the Red Cat telescope. Actually, I think I have it right here. Yeah, I got it. Yeah, it's this tiny little thing. It's a 51 millimeter aperture, tiny thing, 250 millimeter focal length, basically a lens, but it's made for astrophotography. And man, I love it because it's portable and it's fun to use. And don't get me wrong, I love massive telescopes.
Hmm.
I mean, I I don't remember the biggest I ever used, but yeah, I'm used to using like 24-inch plane waves and stuff like that. But when I go out on my own, this is the one that I just love taking. I mean, the wide field views are stunning, and it's so easy to use. I mean,
Yeah,
I don't lift enough weights to call a 24-inch telescope portable, so this is portable for now. I hope to get that strong one day.
I know our plane wave at the university, the Burt Gaffney Observatory. I think with the old mount, it was well over 1,000 pounds. 24-inch plane wave CDK, and we got the new L mount, really scarily fast, scarily effective for that.
Wow.
But yeah, so I'm down to, this is the one I used for the last couple years, which was just the
Love
Sharpstar 61, which was great. But I actually started astrophotography. I think I have it here in the case. And this is one that Trevor from Astro Backyard recommended, which was this guy, which is your 102 millimeter refractor. The challenge with this, though, is you need the big mount. Like, it really wanted that EQ6R Pro mount, and I had it on anything smaller, and there's still enough girth that you'd lose tracking on it. And so now that people are using these Star Adventurer GTIs, and they're really keeping their system small. And I don't even take mine apart now when I put it in the car. I just lay it down on the seat, which is great. So what are you using as a mount these days?
So we built a private observatory. We actually have two here in Alabama that we built, and we have 22 piers, and I've got one of those piers, technically two, but using one right now and waiting for more equipment. That's another story. So I'm using a Ioptron CEM70, and I have a Borg refractor, which is kind of like a unique scope. I don't know a lot of people who use it.
I have never heard of that.
Yeah, it's if you know the brand Takahashi, it's like the equivalent. It's 107 millimeter aperture refractor. I love refractors, if you couldn't tell. And then I'm very lucky because I have access to all different types of telescopes. So 17-inch plane waves, or Radian 75s, all that kind of stuff. But my own personal one that I use all the time is that 107 millimeter refractor, the Borg.
Yeah, and then that still takes. So, are you about 20 pounds in mass on that?
Yeah, which is the CEM70 from Ioptron holds about 70 pounds, which is not utilizing its full capacity with that 20-pound telescope I got on there. But I want the precision tracking.
And now you moved from California skies to the East Coast skies. What are some of the differences you encountered, and what are some of the challenges that you face there?
Man, the East Coast of the U.S. is just covered in light pollution. It isn't. You look on the light pollution map, I mean, it's a distinct difference between East Coast and West Coast.
Yeah.
West Coast was nice because you had easy access to dark skies, but here on the East Coast, man, it's tough to find a Bortle 2, let alone a Bortle 1. But I mostly shoot narrowband anyway, so I think we just measured it the other time the other day with a sky quality meter. I think we're at Bortle 6. But if I'm shooting with narrowband filters, so light pollution filters, line filters, whatever you want to call them, cuts through the light pollution, so it doesn't matter. I could be in New York City and I can still shoot, those emission nebula.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so cool that we can do that now. You have people like Queeve doing it from Tokyo and getting just incredible results. What about gradients? Do you deal with a lot of gradients, and has that changed in your move?
Yes. So gradients on the exposures that I get. Yeah. What's surprising actually is I can still shoot RGB even from this Bortle 6 area and get really nice color. But I've been using I use PixInsight to process, and I don't want to get too down the technical rabbit hole, but that they have a gradient or background removal that does pretty good. And now there's Russell Croman, who does a lot of the AI plugins for Photoshop and for PixInsight, and he has a gradient removal tool as well, I believe. And I want to start using that one. Everyone keeps telling me it's really,
Is that
really
that
good.
grap? I've been using the Graxpert.
I think that's it. I haven't looked.
Yeah.
I use his other tools like Star Exterminator, Noise Exterminator, Blur Exterminator. I mean, Russell's on a whole nother level. He's pushing the astro processing game to another level. Absolutely love to see it.
So I guess my hope, as I sort of consider myself as the forever beginner, so the level that I want to get to is that what can I take that is easy for, if someone's just learning this for the first time, because so I'm not going to go past Photoshop and maybe one other tool. And so for me right now, I'll use Photoshop and then gradients. If you're in the city, you're going to have a gradient in your photos usually because the city's here and you're here right beside the city. So the sky's not uniformly bright. Gradient, no matter what the conditions. But that Graxpert, and I hope I'm saying that. Someone should put it in the chat. I can't like search and lose our very fragile Zoom stream here right now. But that's really worked. That's really worked for me. And so between that and Photoshop, that's all I use to process my photos. Just a quick question here. Someone's asking about budget recommendations for EQ tracking mounts. So I recommend it to someone today. The Sky Adventurer GTI, which is now only I think $620 in the United States, which I feel like that's an incredible price. And yeah, and I use the AZ GTI, which has the same internal components, I believe, and I put it on just a generic Skywatcher wedge. So the wedge is like, these are really small mounts, they're about this big, and I put it on a wedge, and I've been able to push that beyond the weight. They're good up to 11 pounds, and I think that's supposed to include the counterweight, right?
Yes.
Yeah. But I feel like I've gone beyond that, and my tracking has never, like, I still get way into sub-arc second guiding as I guide along, even being, I believe I'm over 11 pounds. And, yeah. So what's an alternative to Photoshop for $20 a month is a bit too... $20? I think I pay $60 for Photoshop. $20 is a steal.
You gotta get on the student version.
I guess so, yeah. And
an alternative to Photoshop, I think it's called GIMP.
Yeah, so I used GIMP forever. I actually like GIMP way better than Photoshop.
Okay.
I find it way more intuitive. The things that Photoshop does better, and I haven't found it in GIMP yet, is denoise, and then the curves.
Okay.
And so, because Photoshop has this thing called Camera Raw, and as you bring your astro photos in, you can hit Filter, Camera Raw, and I can do almost all my, like within about 10 seconds. And I was actually going to show you how I do that here. Let me see if I can risk switching
in the stream.
away. Yeah, so if I open Photoshop here, I think you can see that. Maybe not you, Ian, but everyone else can. I'm watching the stream. Can you see the stream, Ian?
Yeah, I'm looking at it now. Okay. So there's a delay, but let's see if I can see it. Yeah, I can see it. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So here's a blank. So astro images, when they come off the camera, they're blank. And usually I convert it to a TIFF file. And so basically all I do is hit Apple M a few times when I bring it in. Okay, so this is just generic photo off the camera with my Sharpstar, I believe. Right? So I'm just going to hit Control M and just drag this is called stretching the image, I believe. Right? So I'm just going to do that a couple times. And then I'm just going to go into that raw. And I can see I've got way too much red. So then I can pull my red down. And, fairly quickly, let me just rotate this. Here, we've got the North America. It's actually backwards too. Flip horizontal. Okay. We're so used. This should look like North America. And here's Deadpool here. Here's Deadpool's two eyes.
Yeah.
But really, I haven't really done anything with the image. You can hit your levels and get rid of your darks here. I can see that this is noisy and I didn't dither some other problems, but like within about 20 seconds, we've got an image. And then in RAW, the advantage again of having Photoshop here, this is only a few, it looks like 16 exposures or something, so definitely not enough. But I can go into detail, and I can hit denoise to clean that up. And you also, can go into here, hit clarity, get some of your details there, and then adjust your tint accordingly.
And you've got an image.
And I've got an image, in just a few seconds. Now, I know people with PixInsight can do this much faster. Or sorry, not necessarily faster, but they could probably pull a lot more detail out of this.
Yeah,
Um,
you can really push that signal to noise that you've got.
But it depends on like what your goal is too. Not everybody wants to spend 5 hours in PixInsight trying to pixel peep every little portion of their image. Some people just want to get an image, play with it a little bit, and then have that result because they're excited with it. And it depends on what your ultimate goal is. Maybe you want to start there and work your way up to spending 5 hours on your image or more on using something like PixInsight. And there's also a free alternative to PixInsight. It's called Zero. For the people who don't know what PixInsight is, it's essentially a astrophotography and astronomy processing software. It's super powerful. Most people in the astro world use it for astrophotography, but it's very powerful beyond just astro. A lot of science folks use it, and astronomers use it as well for other things. But in our context, we use it for astrophotography. There's an alternative too, if you don't want to pay. I think it's $350 or something. There's a free version, and it's open source software. It's Cyril. And that's a good alternative as well, if you want to, not pay pay PixInsight.
That's good to know. Hopefully, I'll go back probably tomorrow and put some of these notes in the chat so that people that are watching this as a recording can get to it. Now, I'm getting questions about Seastar here.
Yes.
Yeah. So I don't know. So they sent me one.
Look at that.
Yeah, right here. I feel like Stephen Colbert when he got the iPad like a month early. Do you remember that from like?
I don't.
It was
know,
like
but...
20. It's like 2012. The iPad is about to come out. Stephen Colbert gets one, and he brings it up on stage, and he has a bunch of carrots and vegetables, and he uses the iPad to chop the carrots.
Oh my gosh, that's great.
He's like, "Be jealous. I've got an iPad." And he's chopping his carrots. That's all he does.
I thought he's making like a fruits and vegetables joke. He's like, "There's carrots and celery. I've got apples."
Yeah.
Terrible joke.
I don't know. Yeah. So questions on this. So, have you used one?
So I've not used the Seastar yet, but funnily enough, I got to test like a beta version of the EV scope from Unistellar many years ago, and I've used the Stellina, the first version, and while the price point was a bit off-putting for a lot of people, there was still a lot of interest, and I was very impressed with the capabilities. And I think this was like 2018 or 2019, but I could see that this is the direction that astronomy is going to be going in, because at the end of the day, a lot of the people who are doing remote astrophotography, or even setting up on their own, they are automating almost, or trying to get to the point where they can automate every aspect of their system. The focus, the filter wheel changing. I mean, if you use like the ASI Air or Nina, some of these software, camera and telescope control software, you're trying to automate every single little piece. You're guiding, everything is automated. So it's eventually going to get to the point where instead of having to manually connect everything and then automate, all of it will already be automated for you. And I think that is the Seastar. And eventually we're going to get to the point where the costs are going to come down, and it's going to allow you to get bigger apertures while still maintaining that level of automation.
Yeah, because the Seastar, it's $500 in the US, but it does have weaknesses. And one of the big ones, after using it for quite some time, is the sensor is really small. And so the resolution on the image looks good in social media. Like you'll see a lot of photos on Instagram from the Seastar that look incredible, but that's because you're on your phone screen. So, but do they make a good desktop background? Can you print it out and put it on your wall? No. And the reason is it's only a 2 megapixel camera. And so that's where they're cutting the costs. But what's really interesting to me, if you think about the design of the camera, it's apochromatic. It's 3 or 6 elements. I actually think it's 6. Just like the Ascar 180. And anyway, and so it's creating an image at the back of the telescope that's fairly large, maybe this big, but the sensor is tiny. So it's only taking a tiny, tiny fraction of that image. So hypothetically, down the road, you could have a C-Star Plus with just a larger sensor.
Oh yeah, and I'm sure they're already working on that.
Yeah, and I happen to know that there's some of the other big names in the astronomy community have additions that are still top secret right now. So in the next few years, you're going to see these different telescopes coming out that are quite capable and that are less expensive than a basic astrophotography setup. You know, because I've priced it out recently, a basic astrophotography setup is still about $3,000. So that $620 mount, okay, that's step one. Your basic apochromatic telescope with 70 inches of aperture, that's another $700 when it's on sale. You know, you could go smaller aperture, but you know, let's say we're going with 70 millimeters. And then you need the ASI Air. You probably want an ASI Air these days if you're just beginning. You need the auto guider with the camera. You know, so those two together, that's $500. And really getting that dedicated astronomy camera, you know, a basic ZWO 294 MC Pro, which is pretty much the entry level cooled astronomy camera, like that's still $899 or $1,000. And so you just put those 5 things together, and that's, you know, $3,200 or something. C-Star's $500. And so when the next generation of that comes out, you're really going to be talking competitive pricing there for similar results.
The jump just in a couple of years from the EV scopes and the Unistellars, which were like, you know, around the $3,000 price range, to what you have now, the C-Star, down to $500. That's incredible. I mean, just within the last couple of years. So we'll see where it goes. And I think the most important thing that it is going to do is it's going to get a lot more people into astronomy and make them aware of things like light pollution and things like that. And I think that at the end of the day is going to be the thing that's going to push astronomy and astrophotography forward, is getting a huge base of people, of amateurs, into this hobby who might have been off-put because it's just too technical or too complicated or too time-consuming.
Yeah. We were talking about something earlier, space situational awareness and space domain awareness. If you've got all these astrophotographers using these automated scopes, do you think there's a future there at all to do some, you know, some crowd-funded science to prevent space collisions or detect asteroids or anything like that?
Yeah. So the company that I worked for, we just came out of stealth, called Our Sky, and that's exactly what they're doing is using amateur equipment and amateur astronomers all around the world to use their systems to look for space junk and dead satellites and things like that. And obviously, you know, Our Sky has a professional network of systems as well, but tapping into the amateur network is a huge step forward, because, I mean, if you can have 360-degree eyes on the sky, all like you essentially follow the dark as the Earth turns, like as it gets dark in one spot, more telescopes come online and are, you know, shooting space and
that's amazing
stuff. That would be awesome.
That reminds me of the New Horizons telescope that did the black hole, like where they were using the rotation of the Earth and telescopes positioned all over the Earth to get that first black hole image in M81 or something.
Yeah. Super cool. That's awesome. What is the alternative fixing site called? It was Cyril, SIRIL, and a good buddy of mine is one of the programmers for it, and it's awesome to see a free software available.
So what are its capabilities besides processing? Like, can it do dome control for people that are, you know, diving into that?
So Cyril is that's the post-processing software, pre and post-processing. So you have your images, then you load them into Cyril. In order to capture the images, there are tons of software you can use. ASI Air is one that you brought up. The one that I like to use is called Nina. for people who don't want to be within the ZWO ecosystem, because the ZWO ASI Air, while I love it, you are limited to using ZWO products only. It's like the Apple effect, where all of your Apple stuff works really well with Apple products and not well with stuff outside of Apple. It's the same with ZWO, and if you're fine with that, the ASI Air is awesome. If you have stuff that isn't ZWO you want to use, then you're going to be either using like a like a Raspberry Pi or a NUC computer, or a laptop or something like that. And I use NINA, which is a hilarious acronym. I think it's Nighttime and Imaging Astronomy or something like that.
So does NINA work at professional observatories too? Have you seen that?
Yeah. I mean, the observatory that we have here, the private one that we built, I mean, you can control the dome or the roof with the software. So it can do it all. That's
incredible. And so you primarily do roll-off roofs, right?
Yeah, roll-off is the way to go, man. Because if you've seen those new, I think, yeah, you had a video where you were showing the brand new PlaneWave L mounts.
Yeah.
And those are direct drive mounts. So it uses magnets. And those things can swing at 50 degrees per second. I mean, it's like a weapon. You got to get out of the way. And those things are holding a huge, like 20-inch telescope swinging around at super fast speeds. If you have a dome that only has the shutter open, that dome is never going to be able to swing fast enough with those fast telescopes.
Our dome is incredibly slow, and it's not loud and it beeps. That said,
domes are loud, and they break down a lot.
Yeah, and
which I have had a lot of experience with. Even the ones that are like the clamshell type that open up like a clamshell, those ones are cool because you don't have just that little slot to see through. But again, like, something breaks down, there's a lot of different moving pieces, and you got to be pretty technical with it. But with a roll-off roof, it's a garage motor and a chain, right? And it just pulls it open and closes it. And
so do you notice a big wind? What about the wind?
Oh, you can have your walls higher up.
And then that does a pretty good job?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay. And did you build it did you design it yourself? How, I feel like the gap for me, because I can design I can build a building. I got that. But the challenge for me is that interface between the building and the roof. I feel like that scares me. How do you get over that fear?
So, what do you mean the interface? Do you mean the actual piece of the roof rolling off and the equipment required for that?
Yeah, so I can picture the, sort of a garage door. Is it, what if a big gust of wind comes and, comes up under it? Or is it locked in place with the rollers?
Mm-hmm.
So you just buy the garage door equipment, it goes on a slide.
Yeah, we get high wind. I mean, we just had a tornado warning the other day. The observatory is totally fine. We had 60-mile-an-hour winds, and the whole thing's totally fine. And one of the cool things is there's a company called Interactive Astronomy that makes roof automation.
Mm-hmm.
And so if it has a sensor, and so you can actually have the roof automate itself. So if it detects that the sun has gone down and it's dark, it'll automatically open the roof for you. If it detects a certain level of humidity, it'll close the roof for you. If it detects rain or water, it'll automatically close the roof. If it detects wind speeds over a set amount that you tell it, it'll close the roof for you. And you can set a delay where it's okay, the wind picked up, but it only sustained for 5 minutes and then went down. You can tell it to just stay open. You can fully automate your roof, which is great because then you can connect your automatic roof situation with your telescope through NINA. And so your telescope will, if the roof is going to close, your telescope parks itself, the roof closes, and then once the wind dies down or the clouds pass or whatever, it'll automatically reopen, and your telescope unparks itself and goes back to tracking.
So is there a risk that the roof hits the telescope?
It depends on how you build it. So the way we built ours, it's well above any collision point because we can't control everyone's telescope. We have multiple people who have scopes in there. But let's say you have one telescope in there, and you want the roof really low, then you have to have it where the telescope parks itself at such an angle where it doesn't collide. And there are, you can either get sensors or physical switches that actually have to be triggered for the roof to close. So it has safety measures built in if you want to go that route.
Right. Yeah, I know when we had one remote observatory built for us at St. Mary's, and it used some sort of sonic sensor on the telescope, and so it would sense if the roof was getting too close. Now this was neat. They called it the mini ARO or mini BGO, Brick Avenue Observatory, and it was the size of a doghouse, and so no one would suspect it. You'd think it was like full of salt for the roads or the sidewalks, but then the telescope would it would open like this, and then the telescope would come out. But I thought it was really interesting they used a sonic sensor for it.
I haven't heard of that, but
yeah,
you can
far
definitely
out.
do that.
Yeah, so we were talking earlier about the types of questions that we get as astronomy communicators and sort of what makes a good question and what are some not so good questions. So here's an example in this one that I actually get this a lot. They'll say, I would like to get into astrophotography with telescopes. They're like, but I only have $500. Build me a system. And that's really challenging. And I think the normal answer would be, well, you're going to have to start with just a DSLR. Go on B&H Photo, pick up a used DSLR, put it on a tripod, take 20-second exposures. But I want give me a telescope that fits that. So how do you answer that type of questions, and what are some of the questions like that you've gotten?
Yeah, so, oh man, I used to sell telescope equipment, and this is a question always. I've seen the whole gamut of questions, from that question all the way to, I want to shoot galaxies and nebulas and planets, and I want to do solar, and I want to shoot the moon, and I have a $500 budget. What do I get? You know, you have to set the expectation of like, okay, if you have a $500 budget, here's what you can get, and here's what you can do. You have to pick a path. You can't go down all paths. So if I am running into that question, I have a $500 budget. What telescope do I get? I always say, just like you said, get a camera, a lens, and a tripod, and start there. And once you're ready to move to the next level, you get a tracking mount. Maybe the Star Adventurers, like the GTI or the Star Adventure 2s, any of those. But that's where you start. And I mean, you can, if your goal, because it depends on the goal, right? What is your goal? Is your goal to have a telescope, or is your goal to get images? And if your goal is to get images, you can shoot the Andromeda Galaxy with a lens, a tripod, and a camera, and you don't need a tracking mount. It takes a lot of work and processing power, but you can definitely do that. If your goal is to, shoot through a telescope, then I would recommend that you start with a mount first. We had this saying in telescope sales. We would always tell people there are 3 important things for astrophotography. The 3 most important things to remember when you're building an astrophotography system. The first one was the mount. That's the most important thing. The second most important thing that you can get for your astrophotography system is the mount. And the third one is the mount. And that's how important the tracking mount is. You can have a $10,000 camera, a $5,000 telescope, but if you're putting it on a mount that cannot track well, you've just wasted $15,000.
Yeah.
So, and there are people who, again, I mean, this Red Cat's like $800, or you can get like a $300, camera lens, and you can buy like a $300 used Canon camera and throw it on a Star Adventurer, and you'll be taking incredible photos. So you don't need the telescope. Like, the telescope is not actually the important thing when it comes to shooting and doing astrophotography. It's your tracking system, and that's really it.
Yeah. What do you think about the Hyperstar? Have you ever used one of those?
That's the thing that goes on the Schmidt-Cassegrains. Is that correct?
Yeah. So it takes an f10 scope, with a focal length that's super long, and it compresses it to f2, and so
Yeah,
you have all this aperture and then not a lot of focal length.
I like it. I love them. I love even more when they came out with the Rasas. Have you seen those ones?
That's on my Christmas list.
Those are the cool. And then they had an 11-inch Rasa. So if you don't know what the Rasa is, it's from a company called Celestron. Celestron makes Schmidt-Cassegrain telescopes. They're big telescopes with mirrors.
Or not so big. There's a Celestron. There's a 5-inch.
Yeah, there you go. There's a little 5-inch one. And so essentially it's that, but instead of the camera going on the back of the telescope, it goes on the front. So what it does is it compresses the focal length, which compresses the F number, which means you get a wide field of view, and you gather light really, really quickly. And so what that's good for is taking wide field shots and getting tons of detail in a very short amount of time. What might take a regular F10 telescope 10 minutes to take, you can get in 30 seconds. And that's the beauty of those types of scopes.
So it's really a different type of photography, though. So with a regular Schmidt-Cassegrain with the camera at the back, your field of view is going to be super tiny. So you're shooting galaxies and everything because it's even too big for most nebula. Now then you go Hyperstar, you're pretty wide, I assume. You're taking in a lot of sky. You're probably like taking the same amount of sky as one of these guys, like 60 millimeters.
Yeah, you're kind of just pointing in a direction and being like, oh, I'm shooting. Yeah, if you're using a regular Schmidt-Cassegrain, you're like, I'm shooting, this planetary nebula. Where with the Rasa, you're like, I'm pointing that way and shooting.
Exactly.
It's kind of a point and shoot.
Now, are you pixel limited in that case? If you know what I mean, like if you have a Rasa and you want to take a picture of a galaxy, and then you zoom in, is it gonna be pixelated, or can you hold some of that resolution that from the optical system?
Yeah, I mean, there is going to be a theoretical limit, but if you put a high resolution camera like one of those 60 megapixel cameras on there, you can shoot wide and crop in enough to where you're still seeing really nice detail. And then it all comes down to how you're processing it. Now, of course, you're going to reach that theoretical limit or that, a physical limit where no matter how much you zoom in or how many photos you take, it's going to blur if you zoom in too much. But I would say that, I mean, me personally, I would take the route of shoot wide and crop over long focal length, big telescope, and really slow F number.
So do you often, you say you're a fan of refractors. Do you often shoot with really big, like 5-inch plus refractors?
The biggest refractor I've ever shot through was a Skywatcher Esprit 150, which I believe that's 5 inches.
And that's about $10,000, right?
Yeah.
The Esprits? Yeah.
I don't remember how much they are, but yeah, that was the benefit of working at a telescope store.
I guess you don't think about it.
Yeah, you kind of just get to rent stuff from the library. And the Esprit 150 was the biggest I ever shot through, and man, I took an image of M80, Bode's Galaxy M81, and man, it turned out beautiful. Filled the frame. I had like a ZWO, 071 color camera on there. Technical, details aside, it did really, really well. But I just like the lightweight stuff because I like to be portable. If I'm going to use heavy, big telescopes, I'd rather just them be set up where I can just automate it. It's more fun that way.
Yeah. I was out there this morning with the Ascar 180. As soon as I got it, even though I could set up in 2 minutes and be plate solved in 3.
Yeah.
And that was enough time for all the clouds to come in.
I love this.
It was totally clear this morning. Get out. Boom. So fast. That's the East Coast for you. Yeah, but I'm actually working on a book, and Sourcebooks is going to pick it up about binoculars. So it'll be 50. I assume they'll title it 50 Things to See with Binoculars to go with the theme. Even though, if you know my books, they're like 50 things, but like a thing might be the galaxies of Leo or the galaxies around Ursa Major, right? Or the summer double stars. That's like a thing. So there's still hundreds of things in these books. So don't let the 50 things scare you away. Just numbers sell. Anyway, so I've been using these wide field telescopes because at 180 millimeters of focal length, that's almost identical to the field of view of your 10 by 50s binoculars. So that's been what's really cool about that little telescope for astrophotography, is that it actually creates an almost perfect binocular field of view. But have you ever done binocular stargazing?
Oh yeah, they are awesome. Actually, one thing that is super cool is the solar binoculars. Have you seen those?
Oh yeah, I have a pair in a box somewhere. Yes, I have them.
Toys, man.
You gotta. I actually got a whole bunch of stuff after the last eclipse, the 2017 Great American Eclipse. Solar stuff got cheap. I got the H alpha telescope and the solar binoculars.
Fun.
Yeah.
That's one thing I haven't gotten into. I've only attempted solar astrophotography a couple times, but never seriously. And I think that'll be my next step once I eat up all of my. Or I guess once I get time, I guess.
Yeah. Well, even last week there was that huge coronal hole in the sun, and it would have been amazing. Weird, yeah.
Super cool. There's a question here. Is there a budget tracking mount? So we were saying that the Star Adventurer GTI, which I think you were saying is on sale for $600 or $700 now.
Yeah.
Great mount. Highly recommend that one. If you want the earlier version of that, which is called the Star Adventurer Pro, those are, I believe, $400. You can get them used for $300, and those don't have the go-to. You can't use your phone to control it. You kind of have to manually point it around. But that is a great budget tracker, and there's a equivalent from Ioptron. I think it's called the Sky Guider, but that's one of the ones that I would recommend.
If you need it more capacity, there's a mount that goes on sale a lot by Explore Scientific, and that's the IXOS something -100, and that has more capacity. It looks a little retro with this wire hanging off to this little battery pack, but apparently it works. People are getting great astrophotos with it, and that is $800 for the extra, because it is a little more higher capacity of a mount. But it was on sale on Black Friday for under $400. So if you watch the sales, sometimes it comes through. Nice. So there's another option, that Explore Scientific X something -100. I think it's got 14 pounds payload.
Nice. I haven't used that, but I do remember. I do remember that one.
Yeah. Black Friday was, so it's been interesting with telescope prices. The Black Friday, there were a lot of Black Friday deals, and it seemed like some of them stuck. And I think, I don't know what's actually going on in the telescope industry. Prices went way up for COVID, inventories went way down, telescopes were hard to get. But now I wonder if the prices went way up because there was no supply and there was lots of demand. But now that they've built a whole bunch of telescopes, supply is back. I'm wondering if they've got too many telescopes, which should put some downward pressure on the telescopes, keep them on sale for a while. Do you have any insight into that?
That's probably what's happening. I mean, I think you're hitting it. I don't have insight anymore, but that's what I would assume that's what is happening. And with the upcoming eclipse, you're going to see a huge spike in solar equipment.
Right.
And then after the eclipse, you'll see a huge drop in price for solar equipment.
Yeah, I know. I got my H alpha telescope for $200, and the solar binoculars were $20.
Amazing.
That's
amazing.
I think I was buying something on B&H Photo, and I needed $5 for extra shipping, and it was cheaper to get the solar binoculars than it was to pay for the shipping. And that's where I got them. This is weird. I got the softbox light, and about half an hour into this live stream, I still turned red. I think I need to update my camera or something. I think it gets warm or something. There, I'm normal color.
Oh yeah, I can see it. Oh my gosh,
so goofy.
It's so funny. There's where'd you get that shirt? Okay, so this shirt, the Stargazer shirt, I own a clothing brand called Stargazer Designs. We make like these beanies, the Stargazer beanies and stuff like that. And we have our logo on this. So if you're ever interested, just go to wearstargazer.com. That's where we got our merch.
That is cool. That was my biggest. That's my biggest complaint is I don't have enough merch. I have I do like one Learn to Stargaze shirt from Sticker Mule, and then I wear that until it wears off. But it's the challenge of being in Canada. One, you've got the exchange rate, and then the shipping, and sometimes customs. But like getting a T-shirt shipped up from the States, a custom T-shirt is like $70. It's insane rough, being like not in America.
Yeah, shipping to I mean, even like we'll ship clothes to like Australia or the UK, and shipping prices are pretty all right. They're not outrageous, but when you get to Canada, for some reason, it's outrageous. I don't know what's going on there, but
yeah, it's funny because sometimes you'll get something here, and then you'll get an extra bill from like FedEx for all the duties that they had to pay.
No.
Yeah, I used to order my books from the States. Now they ship them. Now they print them in Canada. But I would get the book, and then you get the duty, which sometimes was more expensive than the book. And now I really realize why books are so much more expensive in Canada than they are in the States. Like there's this custom and duty tax that they charge for non-Canadian produced books. Anyway,
so Taylor 14Zik says, I just used my Popular Science by Celestron StarSense 100 AZ scope and iPhone adapter to take astrophotos of the moon. Now, that is something that I think doesn't get talked enough about in the world of astrophotography, is using your phone to take photos of the moon. I mean, it's a little tough to like line it up, but Celestron has some phone adapters, and you can get phone adapters where your eyepiece, where you would look through and see the moon, phone adapter will attach to the eyepiece, and it puts your camera over there, and then you could just snap really nice sharp photos of the moon. And I think you would be surprised how many people got into astrophotography just by doing that.
Yeah.
When I worked at the telescope shop, I had so many people that I would talk to, so many customers who got hooked on astrophotography by taking photos of the moon through their telescope, and they're like, I want to do this now. And I think it's that aspect of sharing it, and I think that's why a lot of us do astrophotography, is the aspect of sharing it with other people, showing people, hey, did you know that this stuff is actually up there? And you don't need the Hubble scope to see it. Like, I can do this. You can do this. That's what makes it so cool.
And you can even do Saturn and Jupiter with your phone as well. I've gotten great photos of Saturn with my phone. It really helps to have a really solid cell phone adapter, though. Some of the cheap ones.
Oh, yeah.
So if you're looking for Christmas presents, then like the Celestron NextYZ adapter is pretty much the only one that's worked for me.
It's the best one.
And it gives, because you can change the distance to the eyepiece as well. And then on my Patreon, I don't know if I posted it anywhere else, but I've 3D printed adapters for. I have one here. Yeah, because oftentimes you upgrade your eyepieces if you're in visual astronomy, but then these cell phone adapters don't fit on these. And so I 3D printed my own iPhone adapters, which are just a circle, and that sort of like hugs the rubber, and then the phone will just sit into that.
That's super cool.
And so
I love those iPhone adapters. I don't know if any of you are on TikTok. There's a whole group of astro people who live stream the moon. They just hook their phone up to their telescope and go live on TikTok and just live stream the moon all night, chatting about the moon. And I started doing that way back when, and it was so much fun doing it. And it's amazing now to see how many people are doing it, because it's so easy to do. I mean, the moon, phone, telescope, moon, and especially if your telescope can track the moon.
Yeah.
Oh my God! Then you just
sit
back and you get to have these conversations with people online, and you get to talk about space. And there are so many people who will just like be on there wanting to talk about space, finding their community of people. Like, they didn't know that there are people out there who love space as much as they do. So it's a great way to connect with people.
Those were some of my most popular streams. If you go way back into my history, is just hanging out in the backyard. I'd either use my Dobsonian, which was neat because you could pan it around and you had a ton of magnification, with this 12-inch, or with the Smith Cassegrain, and then you just use the hand controller as well. The moon is amazing, and I think, if speaking to the visual astronomers out there, like if the moon is up, you might as well observe it. But I think the goal with lunar observing, or what I wish people would do to appreciate it more, is to actually learn the names of the seas, learn the names of the craters. And I think that makes a big difference in your enjoyment, because then they sort of become your friends. And they also look a little different every time you see them because of the way that the Terminator falls. That's a line between night and day on the moon. And so every time you revisit a target near the Terminator, it's going to look a little different. And you see something new every time. So one time I found this huge crazy valley on the moon. And I took it to Dave Chapman, who's sort of one of the... He's written a ton of stuff about the moon. He just won some awards with his book, Mi'kmaq Moons. There's another... Oh, here it is. Speaking of Christmas presents, here's a good book. It focuses on two-eyed seeing. So Dave's an astronomer, but he teamed up with an indigenous lady, and she did the folktales surrounding the moon, and then he did the science. And then they hired an indigenous artist to do all the art. So yeah, there's Dave here, the astronomer. He just had an asteroid named after him, Dave Chapman. And there's Kathy LeBlanc, and then your illustrator as well. But yeah, so you can really develop an insanely deep appreciation for the moon just by observing it. And you can get one of these little sorry, I've got the bookshelf right there, so I can just pull off random stuff. One of these sky and telescope maps that sort of fold to like whatever phase you're in.
Oh, that's cool.
Another great Christmas present for some. These go out of... They don't print that many of these a year, and I think they go out of stock. But another great stocking stuffer idea if you're shopping for astronomers, moon maps.
That's awesome.
And then Dave and I did a book on the moon too, but I don't want to oversell my book collection here too much.
Would be cool too is if you want to make the transition from stargazing into astrophotography, but don't want to get overwhelmed by the all the different pieces that you need and all the software and all the costs and stuff like that. The best thing you can do is just get a camera and a tripod and a wide lens. Just get one of these and put it on a tripod. Mm-hmm. Because wide field astrophotography, like your background there, you can take that by just setting this on the ground and hitting, 10 seconds. And then you can start to take really cool photos. Like if you want to share stargazing with other people online, you can set this down on a little timer. You could frame yourself looking through the telescope and then, hit the shutter and then run over and look through the telescope.
That is so much fun.
Oh, dude, the photos always look amazing because you're out there in like a dark sky spot. You have the stars out, and then you get this cool shot of you looking through the telescope with the stars. Like it's so much fun to do like little.
With the laser pointers.
Yeah, you get the laser pointer out. Like you can get super creative, and you don't need to get the telescopes and the dedicated cooled cameras and the tracking mounts and the software.
That will get you Instagram likes. if that's what you're down for.
That'll get you hooked on astrophotography.
Yeah, chasing likes will get you hooked on a lot of stuff, apparently.
But there's two avenues as well for astrophotography, and people put themselves in like these two camps. And there's a third camp as well, which is like the solar astro people, but that we'll disregard them for a moment. But there's the astrophotographers who are the DSLR Milky Way, nightscape, like your background there, those types of astrophotographers. And then there are astrophotographers who do the deep space stuff. They do nebulas, galaxies, star clusters, all those different things. And they're all astrophotographers. And then there's a third category, which I call like the solar system astrophotographers. They shoot the planets or the sun or the moon. But those three all of those are under the astrophotography umbrella, and I mean you can go super deep down the astrophotography iceberg.
In any of those columns.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because you can have people that do this, but then they'll they'll integrate over multiple days and hours, and you'll see all the dark nebula and every little cloud of space dust in the galaxy shows up in these photos with enough integration time. Like this is 20 seconds, 600 ISO or 800 ISO. That's it. But like if you put it on a tracking mount and go all night, dang. And then you have the people that animate them, like where you have the
time lapses, star trails.
Get to see all the satellites. You got airplanes. There's one airplane where you see them shooting across. It's crazy though when people go deep on planets, and you can like Jupiter turns, right? So if you're getting data on Jupiter all night, it's turning, and so normally if you stack those together, it wouldn't work. But there's this software called WinJupos or something, and it'll take that turn, it'll create a 3D map of the planet and stack your pictures in 3D all over Jupiter, so that the final picture is like hyper HD of that planet, which is just insane. And that's actually NASA software that was open source, and someone pushed it down and made it into a free app, which completely blows my mind. So Dylan O'Donnell from Australia has a video on how to do that, which is just, it's on my bucket list, but there's a learning curve because that's deep down the planetary avenue.
Yeah, and have you heard the term deepscape before? A deepscape astrophoto.
So that's where you sort of do dark nebula, am I right? Like this, and just get a lot.
So a deepscape is where you are still doing landscape astro, but you are going deeper than just the Milky Way. And so an example would be, there's a photo. It's this guy from New Zealand who did it, but it's a mountaintop, and right above the mountain is Andromeda. And the way he took it was he used like a 200 millimeter lens or something, and then just got far away enough to where the mountaintop and Andromeda look like the same size, and you can see his process. He shows his raw frames in like his blog. Yeah. He's like, here's the shot I did of the mountain, and then I turned the tracker on, and here's like Andromeda, and then I just stacked them together, and you get Andromeda like rising or setting, whatever, over this mountaintop, and it's crazy cool. And you can do the same stuff for like Rho Ophiuchi or Orion, where you have these deep sky targets, and you put and you track them, and you have a foreground object, and you just get the correct focal length to match it. Those are just so beautiful. But I think the challenge there, and we'll answer one more question, and then we got to sign off. I actually have to go to class in about 30 minutes here. Last meeting of the semester at grad school. Woo. Oh yeah, I was gonna say, it's really important when you do those to show your process, because those photos are very easy to fake, which is not cool in this community, and you'll get a lot of hate from the astrophotography community, the legitimate astrophotography community, for posting a fake photo. So a lot of the times, if you do that, it's really important to post a time lapse of your process in Photoshop for how you did it. Right. Otherwise, people will also claim it's fake, and that video that you post will get a ton of attention, and you'll get, if the end photo is awesome, mad props and huge respect for pulling it off. 100%. But 100%. They might think it's fake. If you are faking it, just say it. Just say it. Yeah. Then it's just art. If you're compositing something, you're pointing south or you're pointing north, and then you put the core of the Milky Way. Like, if it looks cool, great. Just say that you did it. Like, no one cares. Yeah. But if you why do you want to lie about it? This is a real. This is how it looked. No. No, that's not how it looked. Last question from Taylor there. Can we use Photoshop to edit astro photos? Absolutely. There's an option in the C-Star menu. You hit save each frame. It'll save each frame in the camera as RAW, and then you just use the USB port on it, wherever it is. Here. Plug it into your computer. It shows up in the file menu. Download them, stack them, and do your PixInsight or Photoshop magic. Yeah. So one of the challenges here, maybe one more question for me, because I use GIMP for this, to convert my FITS files to my TIFF files. A lot of people, but Photoshop doesn't do it by itself. How do you do it? Or do you do it? If I'm using PixInsight, then it'll automatically, you can export it as whatever you want. JPEG, PNG, TIFF, fits whatever you want it. So you import a fits file and then you export it as whatever you want it to be. And Photoshop, you could save it as TIFF as well.
Right, but Photoshop won't take a fits at all right now.
That's true.
So you
have to use a fits converter.
Right. So there's
so if you want a free way to do it, you could probably. I'm just going off the top of my head here because I actually don't know. I'm so like ingrained in PixInsight.
Well, there was Fits Liberator was the NASA free one.
Okay.
But the issue I had with that is sometimes I would put in a color fits and it would come out grayscale.
Oh, because you have to debayer it.
Yeah, that was over my head at the time.
Yeah, that probably get a little technical. You could probably use a free software like Cyril, import a fits file, and then just export it as a TIFF file. That would work too.
So
GIMP, Photoshop only uses TIFF. Yeah.
Right. So GIMP does it.
GIMP.
So GIMP opens it. So I usually
easier.
I open it in GIMP and I save it or export it as a TIFF.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Even easier. Yeah.
But there's still another. You have to like click this Nexus button. It's kind of annoying.
Why do they gotta make it so complicated? Everything's gotta be complicated.
There's always that one thing. That's why I think video is so helpful in teaching, because then you see them hit that button that you might just click through naturally, and it's hard to, like, even with books, it's not the same as like watching a YouTube video and getting that direct.
100%. So if anyone is interested too, I do astrophotography workshops, and they are aimed for people who have absolutely no experience using a camera whatsoever, all the way up to people who, they've tinkered with the tracker before and want to get more into it. And I do the wide field nightscape, landscape astrophotos where, you have the Milky Way and a foreground subject like trees and stuff. I do those types of workshops. And then I also do the deep space workshops, teaching you how to shoot things like the Orion Nebula or Row of View Guy, things like that. And they are in person, and we do a lot of like astro adventure workshops too. So if you want to combine outdoor adventures with, taking photos, even if you have no experience whatsoever, but you want to, you could check it out. I have some up right now at ianlauerastro.com, and they're all in 2024, obviously. But check them out. Some of them are already sold out. There are some more that are available, and more that are going to be coming up.
All right. Well, is there anything else you want to say to the the viewers here? Just enjoy astrophotography and enjoy Stargaze, and get other people interested in this too. Like, you're obviously here because you have an interest in astronomy and stuff like that. But share your passion. You gotta love it. Yep. All right. Well, I think we should sign off here. We're at about time. But this is great. I'm going to end the stream, but let me know in the comments if you'd like us to do this again, or if there's anyone else you'd like me to talk to. For sure. Subscribe, follow Ian on Instagram, and just remember that